Hi, everyone. I'm Therese, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who have survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. This week, we are closing out our Movement is Healing series, and I love that this is where we are landing. Over the past several episodes, we've talked about movement in so many different ways. We talked about dance as a way to get out of our heads and back into our bodies, and as the courage to be seen and to challenge ourselves. We talked about strength training and rebuilding the body that carried us through so much. We talked about walking as one of the simplest ways to move back into our own lives again. And last week, we talked about water, the kind of movement that lets the body feel held and supported instead of pushed. So you might think the final episode of a movement series should be about some grand finale kind of movement, something bigger or more impressive, something with sweat, sneakers, and a very dramatic soundtrack. But no, this week we are talking about rest. Because rest is part of movement. It's a massive part of healing. It is part of rebuilding our muscles, our joints, our minds, and our souls. It is so important, yet for caregivers in the after, rest can continue to feel like an elusive oasis in the desert. Caregivers are very good at pushing through, aren't we? We know how to function on broken sleep, little sleep, or absolutely no sleep. We know how to keep going when we are running on empty. We know how to listen for sounds in the hallway, keep the phone nearby, stay ready for the next fall, the next call, the next symptom, the next appointment, the next decision. We know how to carry worry in the body and still move through the day like everything is normal. There you are in a grocery store, comparing tomatoes, while your nervous system is running a full emergency operations center. That is caregiving. And even when our caregiving journeys end, our bodies don't always get the message right away. The house may be eerily quiet now, but your ears are still listening for a moan or a cry. The alarms may not be pinging now, but you're still checking to make sure you didn't miss an attempted 2 a.m. roam around the neighborhood. No one may need you in the same way now, but your body may still feel responsible, alert, and braced for the next thing. That is the after. The caregiving journey has ended, but the body is still learning that the emergency is over. And that is why rest matters. Repair and recovery. Rest is the place where the body begins to believe it is safe to come down. While movement is healing, rest is where so much of that healing gets absorbed. The body does not rebuild because we keep demanding more from it. The body rebuilds when effort and recovery finally get to work together. That is true when we lift weights, walk, run, or swim. It's true when we dance. The movement matters, but the repair matters too. Muscles need time to recover. The nervous system needs time to settle. The mind needs time to process. The body needs sleep, stillness, and softness if we are asking it to rebuild a life after years of survival. And sleep? Let's talk about sleep. Because caregivers know sleep differently. For many of us, Caregiving sleep was not really sleep. It was more like a series of nighttime micronaps, if even that. It was lying there with one ear and one eye on guard duty. It was hearing a noise that may or may not have happened and being wide awake before your brain even caught up. It was getting up dozens of times to assist your loved one to the bathroom and then back into bed, or to attend to another fall. It was waking before the alarm because the body was already bracing for the day. That kind of sleep is not true rest. That is horizontal surveillance with a pillow. And if you are or were a caregiver, you lived it. You know exactly what I mean. Research backs up what caregivers already know in their bones. One study found that as many as 76% of adult caregivers reported poor sleep quality. Caregiver sleep disturbance is directly connected with fatigue, anxiety, depression, caregiver burden, and even the health of the person they were caring for. Sleep is not just a nice to have. It's part of a physical and emotional survival. When we don't get enough quality sleep, it affects the whole body. The NIH notes that sleep supports healthy brain function and physical health, including the heart, the metabolism, our immune system, our mood, learning, memory, decision-making, and attention. Poor sleep is linked with higher risk of health problems like high blood pressure and heart disease, obesity and stroke, diabetes, and depression. People may assume that once caregiving ends, sleep simply returns. Peace returns. Your body relaxes and your mind settles. But anyone who has lived through caregiving knows it isn't that simple. Rest is not always comfortable at first, because rest gives us enough space to feel what we had to postpone. When we were caregiving, there was always something to do, something to manage, something to check or anticipate. That role gave us structure, even when it exhausted us. Then the role changes or it ends, and suddenly there's that space. And inside that space may be grief, fatigue, anger, confusion, relief, guilt, love, and the inevitable question of, who am I now? Rest brings us close to those questions. That may be why we avoid it. Staying busy can feel safer. Doing can feel familiar. Productivity can feel like control. But healing in the after asks us to stop using exhaustion as an excuse not to feel. Rest is also how movement becomes sustainable. If we are walking, lifting, swimming, dancing, training, stretching, or trying in any way to move back into our lives, the body needs time to repair and rejuvenate. That is not optional. It's part of the process. Muscles get stronger when they are challenged and then allowed to recover. The nervous system becomes steadier when it experiences activation and then learns it can return to calm. The mind becomes clearer when sleep gives it time to process, organize, and reset. We cannot build a new life on a body we keep treating like an emergency vehicle. At some point, we have to let the sirens turn off. That doesn't mean we suddenly become perfectly rested people who meditate at sunrise and never scroll on their phones at midnight. It means we begin in ordinary ways. Maybe rest looks like going to bed before the house is perfect. Maybe it looks like taking a recovery day from exercise without calling yourself lazy or lacking discipline. Maybe it looks like sitting outside without trying to accomplish anything, or just turning off your phone. Maybe it looks like letting the laundry wait, or taking a nap in the middle of the day. 5 years into the after, and I still haven't quite mastered that one. Or taking a quiet bath, which happens to be my runner-up happy place. For some of us, rest will have to start that small, and small counts. As we close this series, I want you to think about the word movement more broadly than we may have at the beginning. Movement is not only steps or squats, swimming or dancing. Movement is also the shift from survival into repair. The shift from ignoring the body to listening to it. The shift from autopilot to intentional self-care. That is movement too. And maybe rest is one of the bravest movements we make in the after. Because rest asks us to believe that we are still worthy when we are not producing, fixing, managing, watching, helping, or holding everything together. Rest asks us to believe that simply being here is enough. So this week, my invitation is very simple. Choose one form of rest and treat it like part of your healing, not as a guilty pleasure or a reward, not as a thing you do after everything else is finished, because, spoiler alert, everything else is never finished. This is Movement is Healing, and as we close this series, we are remembering that rest is not the opposite of movement. Rest is what allows movement to heal us. Thank you for listening to New York Girl Again, The After. If this series has spoken to you, please share it with someone else who may need the reminder that their body deserves care, recovery, softness, strength, movement, and rest. Follow along at newyorkgirlagain.com. Join our community and connect with me on social media as we continue talking about caregiving, healing, and life in the after. And please consider supporting my Team for Kids New York City Marathon fundraiser. Every donation, no matter how small, helps children discover confidence, strength, joy, and community through movement. And you can find that link in the episode description or on my social media pages. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.